I hope you're not afraid of heights. So I built this solar powered trailer. I designed this to basically be a kit, a box that shows up at your door with everything you need to put it on a trailer like this 7x16, or this 8.5x24 that I'm standing on, or even this 6x12 in front of me. This is the foundation of my design. Literally the entire kit rests on top of these brackets on the trailer. Now, it might be made out of space grade material, which it's just aluminum, but it didn't come out of nowhere. I actually looked at a lot of different options for mounting something before I ended up just designing my own. Probably one of the easiest options is to use these plastic brackets. You essentially just take some adhesive, you glue the panel to the bracket, and then the bracket to the trailer. You do have to really worry about the surface prep, so you need to maybe sand the bracket and the trailer, clean everything up really well. You gotta use the right adhesive, and then there are a few other little problems, like these brackets are kind of wide, so if you're trying to space a lot of panels next to each other, you end up with some spacing issues. But the thing I hate the most about these brackets, and why I will not use them, is they have a tendency to allow your solar panels to spontaneously take flight. I've seen multiple instances of this online where solar panels have just, without any warning, ripped off and flown off on the highway, and thankfully no one's reported anyone being hurt or an accident from it, but I do not think it's worth it. So, if you're gonna use something like these, I say you probably should screw into the surface you're mounting on if you're gonna be taking this down the highway. And if you're gonna do that, you might as well use a completely different bracket designed for that kind of a thing. These Z brackets from Rich Solar come with some mounting hardware. You've got some bolts that allow you to attach this bracket to the underside of a panel. You've got some self-drilling and self-tapping screws that go through into whatever you're mounting onto. The problem is if you're trying to mount on a cross member, like I've got one right here, you can get one screw into a good spot, but then the other is going to be through this thin sheet of metal. And that was one of the problems I dealt with on a trailer I built. But they installed the solar panels by literally just screwing directly through the thin galvalume roof, just straight through this. Because I was pressed for time, I just found some random chunk of metal, threw it in between the roof and those cross members, and that allowed me a safe spot to bolt onto with nuts and washers. It worked, but I don't like the way that it came out, and I think we can do better. Instead of fiddling around with stuff underneath, you could go on top with a unistrut like this, and you basically just find your cross member, which on this trailer I can actually feel one right here, and you would drill through and put a bolt through. On my old trailer, the roof was so wavy that I ended up having to use these snap and rack metal roof base mounts, which split into two pieces here. So you put a bolt through the roof, through this piece here, and then this screws on top, and then you would put this guy on there. Kind of like so. This is exactly how I mounted the solar on my old lawn care trailer. You can see I've got a lower profile unistrut here. It's only maybe about an inch tall altogether. There's that T-nut, and this is the end bracket attached, just kind of clamping onto the solar panel there. I do have these snap and rack metal roof base mounts underneath. In the centers of the solar panels is that T-bracket there. Some of the downsides here. So this is right in the center of where two solar panels mount. The solar panel is just kind of chafed onto the unistrut and allowed it to start rusting. You can see right at the point where this unistrut butts up against that one, I've got a lot of rusting. So that could definitely be improved upon. Now, instead of doing the unistrut method, you could actually do something very similar to a regular home solar installation, with just rails running all the way down. You got end clamps just like before, and mid clamps in there, and then a mounting that attaches to the roof trusses like this one, with an L bracket that allows you to mount the rail. I've seen a couple trailers built with this method of a regular home solar installation on the roof, and I think it can work just fine. The only thing is most trailers aren't designed to actually have weight on top of those cross members, those roof bows. You are drilling a lot of holes through the roof, which is time consuming, not very fun, trust me, I've done it. And also you just leave yourself open to a lot of leaks in the future. I promise we're gonna get to my system soon, but I wanted to give some insight into why I didn't choose some of these other methods. So far, all of the methods have used drilling through the roof to secure your solar panels. This is the first option where you're not screwing into the roof. This actually bridges all the way across a trailer and allows you to screw into the header that runs along the length of the walls. And then the center bar here is actually telescopic, so it allows you to mount the same ladder rack on a 8.5 foot wide trailer as you would on a 5 foot wide trailer. The challenge here is these things are quite tall just from stock. Now you can shorten them a little bit. You would pull this piece out and you would cut this leg up to where your corner bracing is here. And then now this piece would slide back in and get you to about there, which is still kind of high. You almost have a foot to the bottom of your roof rack. And then you would be mounting solar panels on top. So you're still looking at like 13, 14 inches above the roof of your trailer by using ladder racks. They are quite proven. I've seen them carry lots of ladders on top, and I've also seen a couple people use them for solar installations on their trailers. What I don't love about that is you have to go and get angle aluminum and bolt up different brackets, make your own stuff. I think a purpose-built system for solar can work a lot better than trying to adapt a ladder rack to hold your solar panels. Last video, we figured out a couple things about the solar. We know exactly how much can actually fit on the roof of any particular trailer, the panel types that I want to use, typically in the 200 to 250 watt range, and then kind of the footprint that I'm working with. What I don't know is the exact measurements of your trailer. So if it's a 7 foot wide trailer, is that exactly 84 inches wide, or is that 83 1/4 or so? And then I also don't know the specific trailer construction of what you have at home. I can guesstimate, but I'm gonna have to take a little bit of liberties on what I think most trailers will have, which is why right now I'm excluding the curved roof trailers. There's just too many variables there. So we're gonna focus on the flat roof. I wanna design my own now. And I like the idea of the ladder racks that spread all the way across without mounting anything through the roof. I need to know what's happening in here though to figure out what exactly I'm screwing into and how I might be able to design something to make this work. On the aluminum trailer that I have here, made by Allcom, they actually take two rectangular aluminum tubes and they sister them together. And that becomes your header piece all the way down the length of the trailer. The trim piece, I've got a little section here. This mounts on the side, and that's why you can see all the screws end up being only on this top channel portion here, because there is literally nothing down here. So you can't mount anything lower, unless of course you were attaching to a wall stud, which is typically mounted just up like that and welded on. You'd have a couple of those all the way down. And the roof bows, or the cross members, are just another stud similar that go all the way across, and they're welded on every 12, 16, or 24 inches, just like the wall studs, depending on what you spec for your trailers. I've seen a couple other trailers just have a simple L-shaped angle iron in the corner here of the trailer header, except it has another little feature to it where it drops back down again and then comes over. So you've got about 2 inches, maybe 1.5 inches, and it drops down 1 inch and then over 1 inch. And that's where they end up laying a tube here for the roof cross member or the roof bow, and then they bring in another stud for the wall, and they weld it in usually along this back edge when they're shooting the gun in this way. So that would look like this guy. And then you'd put your wall material, your roof material, and cap it off with a piece of trim like that. I've seen this exact same construction style with lots of different trim pieces. This one happens to be quite tall and thick, but it doesn't change anything. You still have only about 2 inches to screw into or bolt onto. The arising trailer that I have, the gray one, does something a little bit differently. You got a 1x1 steel tube up top, and then they weld on a 1x2 steel tube underneath. And then they have another 1x2 steel tube that comes in for your roof bows or your cross members here. and then they weld on a stud down below. That ends up looking like this guy here. A roof cross member plus your wall studs that come up and weld on the bottom. But that's how my rising trailer looks, just like this. Based on all the trailers I've looked at and the ones I have here, it seems pretty safe that I've got about 2 inches to screw into or bolt to on the headers of most of the flat roof trailers. Now, it would be a little tricky on this guy. I'd have to drill all the way through if I'm wanting to put a bolt across this, but I think I can get away with the self-tapping, self-drilling sheet metal screws that go into just the thin part here. Most of the load is in shear and not in tension. I don't have to bite into much, I just have to have them grip and hold on to this. Part of the challenge will be dealing with all these different types of trim pieces. These aluminum ones are what I could find online, and these white 3D printed ones are modeled directly off of my trailers. Not a single one of these is the same. They're all different. So I've got 7 different options here of trim pieces, and I gotta make sure whatever I design works with all of them, if possible, and any others that might be out there that are different from these 7. So if I'm mounting solar panels up top and I know exactly which ones and how many are going on the trailer, I think the rack can be completely fixed. So I'll put a question mark here, but however they're being mounted, attached, or what they're going into, I don't really know what that is. I want to make sure this whole assembly could basically be assembled off the trailer and it would still work. And then I just want to focus on whatever I'm doing here in the corner and see if I can get this to work together. I believe the simplest idea, since I know the rack is fixed, is to just do basically an L bracket. I can bolt in here however I want, and then I can secure in here however I want, and that gives me some play too. If the trailer is wider or more narrow, I have different options for where this bolts in. I went out and got some scrap aluminum and cut it down to an L bracket and tried this out on the trailer. One of the things I didn't like, you gotta figure out where you wanna mount it vertically, horizontally, and you gotta keep it from being crooked as you're trying to put this whole thing together. It's a little awkward. So let's draw out a trim piece here. Let's just say it does something like that. So I want to mount here, but still solve the problems that the L bracket doesn't really solve. So if I have a shape that does this, but then somehow comes out, and then maybe comes back over, and gives me a surface to mount to, that might be able to work. I can mount in here, I can mount in here. So I think with something like this, I can place it on the trim piece and then slide it up, and it might hit right there, and that way I don't have to level it while I'm trying to screw it in. It just sits right up on there and sort of self-locates, as long as this comes out far enough. Well, I made it in cardboard first, and then I took a scrap piece of metal and kind of bent it up to get somewhat of a shape that looks pretty much like that red line there. So if I got a random trim piece here, take my brand new bracket, that actually kind of self-locates really nicely. Gives me a spot to screw through on the trim piece, and then reaches back over to the roof of the trailer, and whatever my rack is can go on top. So I like this. This might work. I'm gonna model up my bracket now. I'm gonna do essentially what I did on the whiteboard. Just kind of draw this up on this little makeshift trailer I got. Not gonna worry too much about dimensions, but just get something out, and I can kind of tweak it as I go. All right, here's my outline. And I'm going to model this in sheet metal. Now, I don't have any experience with sheet metal, but I think this might be the best option for this particular part. Let's do something like 6 inches, and I'm gonna be making it out of aluminum, probably 3/16 inch thick. There's my bracket. Now, I could send this off exactly as it is and just drill my own holes when it gets here. I mean, aluminum's pretty soft, that's not hard to do, but I'd like to add a couple features to it and maybe clean it up a little before I do that. So one thing I learned with sheet metal, the best way to go about this is to actually, quote, unfold it. This way, when you create a sketch, and let's isolate this so it's easier to see. We basically have a completely flat plate, and this is how it's actually cut out of the flat sheet of metal, whether it's a laser cutter or a water jet or something like that. They're going to cut it first, and then they'll bend it up. So if I have them cut holes in this particular part, in this orientation, those holes will be exactly where I need them when I'm done. Just getting this projected so I can use some midpoints here. Let's do something like 2 inches over, come down to there. I'm gonna have a slot for my rack up top on the top flange of this bracket, which we'll cover a little bit about the rack in a second. And then I want it to cut away this section here, and now I need a couple holes in the bottom for mounting. Good enough for this demonstration. Now that I've made all the cuts, I can refold this part. So go back to sheet metal here, and then come over to refold faces. And there we have it. There's the bracket, the geometries that I want. Now I might add my logo cutout to this to make it look a little bit cooler. Let's do that. Let's add my logo. Cool. Adds a nice little touch to it, I would say. All right, so let's see what this looks like on the side of our trailer here. So it's pretty cool. I can sit here and tweak the actual sketch a little bit. Now I'll finalize some dimensions and get this ordered, but it shows you just how powerful it is to be able to quickly and easily tweak some things to see how it might look. And yeah, that looks pretty sweet. Let's get this ordered. Yes, brackets have arrived, and I'm very happy with how they've turned out. That looks pretty cool. So far, they are behaving as designed. Oops. They self-locate on the different trailer trims, they're easy to install, and they feel really solid once mounted. They also allow for easy adjustments to accommodate for different trailer widths. For example, this trailer is supposed to be exactly 84 inches wide, but really it's like 83 1/4. So probably built by a man. Now, a note on the rack. This rack is solid. It really deserves its own video because there's a lot of details that went into getting it to where it is now, including some, scientific testing. Not really. What I think is important to understand now though, with my bracket and rack design, is that unlike a ladder rack, the brackets and cross members are completely independent of each other. So if you had like a marker light that you're trying to avoid, you can mount the bracket just in front of or maybe behind without having to relocate and rewire that light. Also, if for some reason you needed to replace or add a bracket, I don't know, you can just do so without having to completely remove the solar array. Where this bracket design stumbles a little bit is on the dual channel trim, like on the Allcom, or on the trim that's exclusive to new covered wagons, because it has this rain drip edge that sticks out quite far. I think both of these can be solved with a simple spacer for each, but it does mean that when you're ordering a kit, you gotta make sure you get those spacers for your particular trim type. Let me know what you guys think of the bracket design, and if you're a shop that can actually manufacture these, and preferably tumble and then anodize them, I would love to hear from you. So please reach out to my email, steve@solarpunkit.com. For the rest of you following along, I will see you soon in the rack video. It's coming soon, real soon. And hopefully by then I'll have these freaking awesome made in the USA t-shirts that I designed available as well. Okay, don't fall with an expensive drone. You can't afford the health insurance costs.